Well, we're back again. This time, episode 50. And hey, 50, that's a milestone. Yay! With you as always, me, Chucky, and we've got
It's
Jiggy.
your boy Jiggy up in this bitch.
Settle down, man.
I'm just excited about these movies, bro.
Yes, stellar lineup. Tell the good people out there what we've got for today's show.
Indeed, we start off with Pale Blood from 1990. It's some obscure vampire movie. We go on to a non-obscure vampire-ish movie titled Mountain from 1977, directed by George A. Romero. Then our action segment of the night consists of Howard Hunted from 1993, another in the line of beautiful Andy Sedaris movies. We then go on to Wolf Ward from 2020, a British found footage movie. And then we finish off with a comedy horror light type movie titled My Boyfriend's Back from 1993. And then we have a special conversation afterwards, which you should look forward to about subgenres.
Yeah, boy. Alright, first up we've got Pale Blood from 1990, which is a vampire movie. So essentially, in this one, a vampire travels to Los Angeles to help a private investigator with a recent series of murders, which appear to bear resemblance to vampire attacks. So that's more or less the gist of this one. I mean, there's things that happen later on. We won't tell you too much, so we don't spoil it for you, because I have a feeling there's still plenty of people out there who haven't actually watched this, despite the fact that it's, a 30-year-old movie now. Now, I actually watched this one, I don't know how long ago, maybe a couple of months ago at the most. It was a movie that I just blind bought on Blu-ray. And of course, I put it on again last night, but I didn't pay as much attention to it because I had already seen it just a couple of months ago. It was just more of, refresh the memory. Yeah, this one, it's a bit of an unusual movie. Like, it's got its kind of like own style, I guess you could say, which, it makes for an interesting movie. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a great movie, but yeah, certainly interesting with the way it's filmed, the way it's acted. It's just a bit of an oddball vampire movie.
Yeah, so this is a movie I've actually not really heard much about. I mean, I've seen it pop up on your list a few times, but I'm not like the biggest vampire fan out there. But this one sort of surprised me. Like you said, it has a sort of vibe to it. It feels like a straight to video. It may have been straight to video, I'm not sure. So it looks a bit cheap at times, but I think there's a lot of heart going in it. There's a lot of, I don't know, somewhat interesting idea, so at least I wouldn't go as far necessarily to say innovative, but there's some new things in here that you don't see in every other vampire movie. So it has a nice vibe to it. Somewhat surprising things happen. Some of it I like, some of it's a bit more like 50-50. But overall, I thought it was actually, it's sort of a nice surprise. It's not like a great movie, but it's certainly watchable.
Yeah, well, the lead vampire in the movie, Michael Fury. Well, what a name. Uh, in fact, I think the writers were thinking, ooh, what a spicy name we've concocted for this character. And I think with as the characters introduced in the movie, they managed to find about 4 or 5 different times to say the name Michael Fury. Like within a span of like 10 seconds, they say it like 4 or 5 times. Like when he's in the airport, they're like, got a call for Michael Fury, and he goes to the phone, I'm Michael Fury. Are you Michael Fury? Yes, I'm Michael Fury. Well, I don't know. All I can recall is they said the name like 4 or 5 times in like 10 seconds.
It is a nice name. And it's not really a surprise, by the way, with his character, what we find out about his character. You can sort of see early on where it's going, but I do appreciate how they, in a way, sort of draw out the mystery might be a bit strong, but they sort of draw out the story, which I sort of enjoyed.
Hmm. And the funny thing about it, I didn't notice it too much last night because I just watched whoever uploaded this movie on YouTube, which is a much inferior quality version of the Blu-ray that I actually have. I was just too lazy to go put Blu-ray on for a movie that I had no intention of, like giving my full attention to. So, because as I said, I had watched it only a couple of months ago at the most. So, I lost my train of thought.
I'm pretty sure you're going to talk about Ancient Orange.
Oh, yeah. No, actually, what I was going to say is, I didn't notice it too much last night when I watched it off the YouTube version, but when I watched it on the Blu-ray, it just felt like, I don't know if it was the way it was filmed. It almost felt like, I don't even know if I could say it felt like it was dubbed, but it just, maybe it's the lead vampire himself, but something about his voice just doesn't, it just sounds weird with his character. I don't know. Did you pick up anything from the audio like that?
So I watched the YouTube video that was uploaded. To be honest, I'm so surprised this one hits Blu-ray, but I understand a lot of these lower quality movies are doing that nowadays. So I noticed there was something about him that struck me as interesting. It wasn't like he didn't necessarily have an accent or anything. I don't think he did, but he did have a he had a very interesting way that he was playing his character, and I did get like a depth sense, but he did stand out in like a, I guess you could say, almost an indescribable way.
Yeah. To be honest, there's not too much in the movie that I actually really made note of, other than just the general fact that the movie just does have its own, like we've said, vibe, style. It's just got this kind of like general unusual weirdness to it that you don't really have in other vampire movies. You know, other vampire movies play it pretty straight, and they're usually, for the most part, similar to one another. This one, yeah, it's very different.
And it does have Wings Hauser in it, who is he's an actor I'm not deeply familiar with, but he's like pretty hammy in every movie I've seen him in, including like a 1988 movie called The Carpenter. So Wings Hauser was pretty nice to see here. And his character through the end just gets like so out there, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, he does seem to have a little bit of a following from some of the genre enthusiasts, I guess you could say. I remember him in Mutant and a couple other movies, but yeah.
And so I just wanted to mention, this movie has a lot of music by the band Ancient Orange, which isn't a band, it's a name I knew, but it's not a band I ever actually listened to. So when I'm listening to the music, I'm like, hey, that's Ancient Orange, it's so random. I was expecting something a bit more punkish, but it has sort of almost like a gothic-y vibe, which I thought really fit in with the movie. I mean, the clap scenes, I mean, it felt like it's the exact type of music that would be in this type of movie. So, I enjoyed it. It was a bit repetitive because they played this one song like 3 times, but
yeah, just randomly cut to the band and for no reason sometimes. Yeah,
that's actually another point. There was some I wouldn't necessarily say outsy shots, but there are a few scenes in here that have a bit of a I guess you could say outsy feel to them, like when this one main character seduces a woman and brings her back to her place. It's like done sort of like in the fast motion, but then it slows down as soon as she's on the bed. It looks pretty cool, and I'm not sure what goes into doing scenes like that. And it doesn't happen all that often, but it's noticeable, and I think it just adds to the somewhat unique feel of the movie. I did also want to mention, I'm not familiar with the actress, God, what's her name? Pamela Ludwig. But I did like her apartment. She had some classic vampire movie posters on her wall, Return of Dracula and Kiss of the Vampire, and she was watching Nosferatu. So I enjoy that. She is after my own heart.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. It's not going to compete with something like the original Fright Night or anything like that, but yeah, it's interesting. It just doesn't pack enough oomph, I guess, to for me to really say, hey, you got to go out and watch this. But if you're interested in vampire movies, I'm sure you can sit down and watch this for 90 minutes and at least not be bored out of your mind. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, which is pretty much my average rating.
Yeah, so this one, like I said at the beginning, sort of surprised me. I wasn't really expecting to care much for it, and it's still not a great movie, but it was a bit more stylish than I had imagined it would be, and I thought some of the story elements were pretty interesting. You see where the main character's going, but there's another character who toward the end we find out, hey, he's trying to do this, setting a trap, and it's sort of cool. It sort of surprised me. So this element about this movie I quite like. Has an interesting vibe to it. And if you can get past that, like, almost straight to video feel it has, I think if you're a vampire fan, it's at least worth experiencing once. So I'm going to give this one, and I struggled a little, but I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. That's my average rating, so it's not, particularly great, but it's definitely not bad. So I had an okay time with it. 7 out of 10. Surprises me, but there you go.
Micah Fury's getting your heart under the collar.
Yes, he is. And speaking of Michael Fury, have you heard of Martin Fury?
His name's not Fury.
Okay, so next up we have one of the most famous George A. Romero movies that has nothing to do with zombies or the crazies or any other movie he directed.
Or Bruiser.
Oh God. Next up we have Martin from 1977. Really interesting movie in which this young man who may or may not be mentally ill. He believes himself to be a vampire, and so do his relatives. I think it's, I don't know, uncle or grandfather or something. It's just some crazy old guy. And he does indeed go around occasionally committing, shall we say, murders, crimes upon the lust for women. And this whole thing is, hey, is he, what's going on with him? Is he actually a vampire? And more to the point, can he find a way to survive in the modern world in this, like, really shitty looking small town? So, Martin is a movie I've not seen until I watched it a couple of days ago. And it's obviously I've known about it for years. It just, like I said, for Pale Blood, I'm not a big vampire guy. So even though George A. Romero did it, it's not like a movie I was jumping to see. That said, I thought it was pretty interesting. It had a, I don't know, I guess you could say, you could tell it's one of his earlier movies. It wasn't particularly professional. A lot of the performances weren't necessarily up to par. You did get to see a young Tom Savini, so that's sort of cool. But it's in many ways it feels a lot more like a drama than a horror. But I will say when the horror comes along, the scenes are they're pretty much worth it. So I'm sort of curious because I really don't know. Have you seen this one before?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those movies that I blind bought on DVD back like 15 years ago, give or take. And I only ever watched it once when I first bought that. So, yeah, it's been about that many years since I've actually revisited this one. And I remember the first time I watched it, I had a pretty decent time with it. Now, I don't know if over that course of time, my tastes have changed or something like that, but I just felt like I was expecting a little bit more from it this next time around, and yeah, maybe since that time I don't know, maybe I just don't like vampire movies, or I like them even less now than I did before, but I just don't, like, it just doesn't feel like it's a movie that was made for my tastes, I guess. Because I can see why people tend to like this movie. Like, I can see what people can value in it. It's just not, the things that happen in this movie, it's just not my type of movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I thought some of it was actually sort of compelling. Like, this is sort of awkward. Martin, he can speak, but he almost never speaks. So he's just like this quiet kid who's bringing people the groceries. And this one woman takes a liking to him, wants him to do some housework, and she's a middle-aged woman who wants some action because she's
Oh
lonely.
yeah.
Indeed. And this sort of element of, hey, can Malden love a woman without going as far as being violent toward her?
Where were these women when I was his age?
Indeed. So and that subplot actually, I think, ends in a very interesting and, to me, somewhat surprising way. And there's also a whole nother subplot which wasn't focused on too much, but Martin calling into this radio talk show, and he's being pretty sincere, saying, "Hey, I'm a vampire." And the talk show host, guy is sort of making fun of him. Hey, we got Dracula online. We got the Count, which I thought was funny, but I also sort of appreciated how they wanted him to keep coming on because, hey, he's really popular. People, are asking questions. Hey, how's the Count doing? It's also like a game, but Martin's, he has like no sense of humor, so he's taking it seriously. But I don't know. It's an interesting. I almost would say like time capsule type thing. It just feels 70s, and even though I didn't necessarily love the entirety of the movie, I definitely like a lot of the vibe of it.
Yeah. I like the conclusion, but it's not enough to want me to really revisit just to get to that small moment.
Yeah, and I think the opening's pretty good too, the attack on the train. Mainly because, I mean, I have no idea what it's like in Australia, but people don't generally travel by train in the US anymore. And it just, I don't know, it just seems like such a, I would just say inconvenient, but just so strange, when I'm watching movies and people just on trains, like, it's like just bizarre. And I also know that subways are popular, but I don't usually count subways as trains, so there you go. And it also looks so crowded too, that scene where he's just trying to, this guy's trying to walk by and there's like these three
Yeah.
women. Like, that's so crowded. There's no like social distancing there, so that's a concern.
That'd be a great way to rub up against some breasts.
Well, I mean, you have no choice. I mean, like, even if
Yeah.
you don't want to partake in such carnal activities, I mean, what can you do?
Because that behind him there was like another guy, like some sort of businessman, or
Yeah.
I can't recall, but there was like three women lined up. He could have like rubbed across 6 titties there just in one go.
I know, and that is certainly makes you wish that trains were more popular. And also, I think it's worth mentioning, because I was reading a bit about when this was filmed. And it was filmed in like a small town in Pennsylvania, and the town actually went through like a giant economic crash due to the steel industry in the Midwest that's disappearing throughout the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, part of the reason why that town looks so, low quality, like messed up. I mean, the town actually experienced a lot of economic hardship, so I do think it's interesting, and it brings a somewhat authentic vibe to everything. And that was never really the focus in this movie; it's just in the background. But I definitely thought it brought an authentic vibe to it.
Yeah.
I'll just also add that because it's a 70s movie, there's very little in the way of humor here. It's almost a depressing movie in some ways, very somber, almost like I would say slice of life, but in some ways it doesn't even feel like there's an ongoing plot. So I mean, it's like the one, I forget the actress's name, but the one who lives at the house with Malden. I mean, she just leaves like toward the end of the movie. She says, "Hey, she's going to college," never does, never really comes up again. I'm just another person who's gone. And I think it's interesting too. The ending was extraordinarily. I know, to me, it felt extraordinarily saddened. I mean, they were leading up to it a little, but it just sort of when it happens, I'm like, oh god, this is actually happening, and then boom, it's done. Which that's not a negative or positive. I just thought it was interesting. And then one more thing, there's occasionally some flashbacks in this movie that happen to be in black and white. Of like, you could say it's either like flashbacks of his like past life as a vampire, or you could say it's his fantasies. If you lean one way or the other, rather than that he's a vampire or mentally ill. But it's sort of interesting because it gives you sort of an idea of how persecuted he feels. And really, this whole movie has a very strong psychological slant to it. So if you're watching it for that type of perspective, this is certainly a movie that I can imagine would be a good conversation starter.
For reals.
Indeed. So, this isn't a movie I knew that much about before watching, and I was somewhat lukewarm toward it through most of the movie. I did really like the ironically, one of my favorite scenes was probably the playground scene, but then it just turns out to be a joke, and it's somewhat disappointing. So it's a movie I can imagine watching again, but it's not necessarily a movie I found myself enjoying. So I don't know, it's one of those complicated movies. I give this one a 6.5, and I would probably round that down to a 6 out of 10, which is a bit below average. It's interesting, but it's not really my cup of tea.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. And with that said, I don't think the movie's bad. It's, like you said, it's just not my cup of tea either. I mean, it's a vampire movie, so it already has that barrier for me to get around. And then on top of that, it's a bit of a slower movie, more of a character-driven movie, and vampire characters not necessarily something that I want to really get invested in. So, yeah, 5 out of 10. I can see why other people might like it. It's not for me. But speaking of movies that are for me,
That's a very clever turn of the phrase.
because of the titty action,
Indeed.
we've got the next Andy Sedaris movie, Hard Hunted, from 1993. Almost feel like it's pointless going through the plot of these. They're all basically the same type of thing. Like the small details different, but in general, it's always some bad guy trying to do something, and they just got to stop him. And I mean, in this one, it's a international arms dealer who's going to great lengths to retrieve this stolen Chinese nuclear thing hidden in a jade Buddha figurine. And, it's up to the usual group of undercover federal agents to stop it from falling into the wrong hands, that type of thing. It's really more of the same. We've said this in previous reviews. It's a very consistent series, at least outside of the first one, Malibu Express, which was a bit different, but every other movie has almost felt the same. I mean, sometimes a few different women here and there, a few different bad guys, but well, Edie's back in this one. That's a great thing for me. Some more singing and jiggling, and hey, this time she has a couple of sex scenes, I think, which is that's certainly piqued my interest. I could do without the kissing of the chest pubes. She don't need to be doing that on camera. But if that was me, when I'm taking off her clothes, I'd get her to turn around, and then she'd feel something squirt onto her back, and I'd be like, "Oh, just squirting some lotion. Don't worry about it." And,
Well,
little does she know I've already blown my load, but it's okay. I have reserves. So.
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
There's only so many places. So I guess one thing I want to sort of mention. So the main antagonist in this movie is Kane, who is played by Jeffrey Moore. And there was also in the previous movie Pat Morita, who played a character named Kane. And at the end of the previous movie, which was, I believe, Do or Die, there is an Asian woman by the name of, I think it's Silk, who turns double agent and helps the good guys spy on Kane. And it seems to be the same situation here, only this is not Pat Morita, but it's this white guy. I'm going to assume they're supposed to be the same character. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, and they just had to change actors. They have technically different names, like, in Do or Die, it's like, I think it's Masha Kana, Kane Shuri, and in this one, just the guy's name's just Kane. I'm just going to assume they're the same character, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So I do think it's interesting that these two movies have a bit more of a solid connection as opposed to like just another random adventure in Hawaii. And also, one other thing that stood out about this one to me, even though it's mostly more the same, this one did feel a little more high stakes just because one of the agents was kidnapped, and then that cast one of my favorite my favorite characters, Jessica Jones, also known as Robita Vasquez, to get out like angry and pissed off, like, hey, let's go like kill all these guys and get her back. So it did feel a little more, I don't know, just plus randomly Ella Bland had Grogan's amnesia for like 3 seconds. So there was a little more going here than I guess the average movie. So I did enjoy that. And that's probably really the only reason this stood out a bit more for me.
Well, one thing that I was pretty concerned about, I don't think there was like a hot tub scene early in the movie, and so I was getting a little worried there. But then finally, around like 40 minutes in, we got to see some hot tub action, and there's some good titties in there.
I also liked the random radio show they have, and they're just like randomly in the fucking hot tub. Like I don't know if that's how most radio shows do it. Like they just relax with this topless guy in a hot tub. But that's an interesting way to run the radio show.
Is that the same one that did the radio show in Hard Ticket to Hawaii? Because I think there was like a radio show in that, wasn't there?
I can't remember the count numbers. If it was KSXY or not, but if it was, that would be a great connection, though. I would really appreciate that.
I think it might be, but I'd have to go back and.
Oh, actually, speaking of that scene, early on, there's a I absolutely loved because when I was watching this, I rewound it to rewatch a scene. There's a beautiful song, "Another Day in Paradise." It's pretty much a Jimmy Buffett song, only sung by a woman, and the lyrics are just horrible. But it's just beautiful. Like you can just close your eyes and imagine it's Jimmy Buffett, and me being a rather decent Jimmy Buffett fan. I just really enjoyed that.
I think that's actually Edie singing it, or Cynthia Brimhall, because
Yeah,
she does songs in the previous 2 movies as well, and I think Andy Sidera says that's actually her singing it.
Yeah, and she is the one credited on the video I found. So, yeah, so I mean, it's a corny song,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed it. I'll be honest, I had fun with it.
Yeah, there were a few like that machete kill was pretty cool. I like the one scene where she like drops a grenade in the plane, and I don't know. It's just I think grenade deaths are one of those things where it's just there's something to them, because if I was in that situation, like you actually unless you can get to it within a second or two, you're about to die.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's one thing to just instantly be shot in the head and die, but it's another to actually know, with a little bit of time beforehand, that what's going to happen, which makes it suck even more.
Yeah, and on a somewhat related note, I sort of love how in this universe, these assassins all have like these stupid names. Like this movie is Wily and Coyote. Like, and I guess they're proud of it. Like it just cracks me up. Like, because Kane's a pretty serious guy. He doesn't look like much, but he's like just like listening to these two like making jokes, and he's like just standing there, not cracking a smile. And these guys think it's like okay, hey, let's joke around. So I think it's funny what sense of humor some of these assassins have. So I guess more power to their confidence.
Yeah. I noticed Roberta's titties were bouncing a little more than usual, so I don't know if something happened there, but my eyes pick up on these types of things.
Well, I guess that's a good thing. Yeah. So and obviously she's one of my hashtag favorites. So I was certainly okay with seeing more of her pop up.
While you popped off.
Yeah, I was implying, but not actually saying because.
Yeah. Okay. She faked the orgasm.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty decent line. And also how shitty it is. Like, oh hey, we were lovers, baby. I mean, guy was obviously scum anyway, so it makes sense. But like, even when I was watching, like, I was like, you piece of trash.
There's what one or the only other thing that I had down to mention here. Early on in the movie, there's a scene. I can't remember who they were, but there's a bunch of guys in this meeting, and the phone rings, and this guy answers, and he's like, "We were not to be disturbed unless it was an emergency." Well, obviously it's an emergency, isn't it, you dickhead? I mean, what were you thinking? Just say that after they tell you the reason for calling.
Yeah, it's not the best piece of.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little thing, but it's just sometimes it's the little things that make these movies enjoyable.
Indeed. And speaking of enjoyable, what would you say this one is worth?
Yeah, I do think it was maybe a touch better than like maybe the previous one, but I still don't think I can put it on the same level as Hard Ticket to Hawaii. I mean, like we've said before, how do you beat a mutant snake? So I think I'm still gonna give this one a 6 out of 10. But if I was going full Jiggy mode, I'd say like 6.5. But yeah, it's it's still pretty much more of the same. Just maybe a couple different women, a few details change, but at least I know what I'm getting out of these movies when I go into them. You know, I know I'm not gonna go in and have a boring 90 minutes. I'm gonna see some things that I enjoy seeing that don't necessarily make up for a great movie, but there you go.
Yeah, so I do think this one is a little bit better, more enjoyable than the previous movies. I mean, it's like obviously pretty much the same. It's like Picasso Trigger, I thought was a smidge better than, let's say, Savage Beach, or whatever the movie is called. But I think both of them pretty much got the same rating from me, and this one's still getting a 6 out of 10. But it does seem a touch better, and I hope that they continue on with this Kane guy, preferably with the same actor in the upcoming movie, just to give these movies a little bit more of a continuity feel, which I feel like would be preferable to just like I said, random Hawaii adventures. So I think a 6 out of 10 is pretty fair for this movie.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's the next one. It might be the next one, but I think Julie Strain's now in those movies, so we're gonna see some more titties.
Indeed, and that's something we've never seen in these movies before. So I'm interested.
No.
So speaking of movies that are terrible, next up we have a British found footage movie called Roof Ward, which came out apparently in January last year in 2020. So pretty much this one woman and this one guy comes to her house with his friends, and I'm not entirely sure why, because the woman wants nothing to do with him. I guess he wants to say, hey, what's up? So the woman ignores him, and then it's like, oh, hey, you missed your bus, so I'll take you then. This woman doesn't know the friends, so it's like really awkward drive, like, oh, hey, because nobody's talking, and this one guy's like a film student, so of course he's filming everything, because that's not awkward. And this like conversation, I guess, and stuff happens, I guess. Then they finally get there, and then there's a camera being shaken because it's walking in the woods, and yes, and then I guess waves and aliens, and so it's interesting to me because I didn't know a movie that was so simple in idea. Just a found footage movie that you can make for like probably $150. I had no idea a movie like that could be so convoluted. Because I'll be honest, this movie confused me. I'm not sure if the waves were the aliens, or if they're just. I really don't. I was like, there's an explanation at the end that goes on for like 55 minutes. It's probably only like 8 minutes, but it feels like it takes for fucking ever. And I'll be honest, I was like, after the first like 2 minutes, I like phased out. I had no idea what's going on. Like, she's talking about like a 28 years culture and like a 11 years culture, and I have no idea what that has to do with anything. I'm so confused. And I was just confused. And I didn't think a movie like this could confuse me, and unfortunately, that's not a good thing in this case. So this was a somewhat unenjoyable time for me. But before I get more into that, what did you think about this one?
It's one of the lamest fucking movies I've ever fucking seen. This is the movie that I referenced on the forums, the shit movie that I just watched.
Yeah, it's understandable.
It's 2020 and they're still making these terrible found footage movies. Like, found footage is a genre that, there's a place for it. There's a way to do them well. So I'm not ripping on the genre like itself, but in 2020, it's gotten to a point where people are just seeing it as an opportunity to make a movie that doesn't cost anything. We know it's like the simplest movie to make, but it's also one of the most difficult movies to master.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of saying it. I mean, these types of movies are everywhere online. You can't fart without sniffing one on Tubi. I mean, it's, I could find a million of these just at the click of my fingers. And, this one, like I said, terrible writing, because you have no fucking idea of what's going on in this movie. Is it werewolves? Is it aliens? And then there's all this other stuff. I don't know. I was just, for the most part, I was bored out of my mind as well, because it's just them walking around doing stuff or just having these conversations, dialogue that I have no interest in. I mean, this is worse than If a Tree Falls, which we discussed not too long ago, which also made me question Dawn of the Dead. Was I too hard on Dawn of the Dead? And this movie, I think, solidifies that. Because this is the type of movie I should have been reserving my 1 stars for. This is... Yeah, I retract my Dawn of the Dead rating. I'm giving that a 2. This one is a definite 1. This one sucks ass.
First official retraction, so well done. Yeah, so there's a few things I found amusing about this movie. I guess, well, that was an interesting preface, because this first thing isn't amusing. So this movie isn't just simply some guy with a camera. At the beginning of the movie, I guess the main woman had cameras up around her house, because we get random footage from like different rooms of them talking and not just the camera. And then you get to see some highway footage of the car driving by for some reason. And then, you get to see, not just the guy's camera, but this woman's cell phone and all these different points of view. And it's unfortunate because none of it, one, it makes it somewhat disorienting. 2, it's just annoying as fuck. I don't know why they would do that. It doesn't really add anything. Because I guess, yeah, you get a different point of view, but when you don't get any more like detail about what's actually going on, and we have no idea what's going on until like 40 minutes into the movie, and that's only because we happen to see a spaceship, or what looks like to be a spaceship, fly by. That's the first time in the movie I'm like, oh hey, this is sort of interesting, and then you see how that goes. Yeah, so I think it's funny. The woman who was not the main character, I think she was played by an actress named Mandy Rose. She had a line in there how she was like training to be a nurse or something like that, which is fine. But I think it's funny that even though she was training to be a nurse, she had like no sympathy for people who were like cutting themselves and any type of self-harm type thing. Like, it's obvious that woman was somewhat mentally not necessarily stable, and she just gets all pissed off when it's like the guy's fault. So I don't know, it's just annoying characters, and you're pretty much clueless as to what's going on. And even when like this this like digital hat pops up at the end, like, come here child, like, you just don't care.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm so confused. I don't know. I think like the aliens were like had control of the werewolves for some reason, but I don't know. And honestly, I just don't care. It was a disappointing movie. In my opinion, the only really interesting thing about it is the fact that it was British, which is, I get to hear some British accent, so that's almost fun. But this was, I mean, like you said, this is a special type of terrible movie.
Yeah. And I was looking for something positive to say about this movie, or something that they did, well, maybe not terribly. One thing I will say, I don't think the acting was all that bad, but the funny thing about that is, I think that actually makes the movie even less enjoyable. Because at least if the acting is shit, you can laugh at the acting.
Yeah.
You can't laugh at this acting. It's just, it's below average acting in a terrible movie.
I guess this is a small thing, but it did annoy me. So, like, the main character was described as having OCD tendencies, and I didn't see it. Like, I don't know what they were talking about. Like, it's like it came out of nowhere. She was quiet, but OCD, it didn't really seem that way to me. So it just, I don't know, it's just random. It had no relevance. And like I said, I think the biggest problem is the whole, the explanation at the end. And the whole, like, 28-year and 11-year cycles. I had no idea what she was talking about. And I'm not sure if the other guy's following along either. That's probably why he just wanted to die. He wanted to be over with it. And I can't blame him. So even, I don't know, I guess the werewolves were, like, if that's what they were okay. But, they pop up for like 2 seconds and that's it, and it's just not worth it. I guess the one positive thing I could say about this movie is I did sort of like seeing the British wards. It's a cool idea, but it just god awful.
I also noticed that, or at least when a few people got attacked all around the same time, they would always like drop their camera at like the perfect angle to watch them getting attacked. I mean, it just...
You've got to love found footage.
Yeah. And it also makes you question, like, okay, I understand maybe one of them might have been holding a camera, like, so like everyone's holding a camera and dropping it, like, I don't know, it's just, like, especially one of the women, like, I was thinking, she's scared out of her mind, why would she be, like, filming? I don't know, I didn't buy any of the shit they were selling.
Yeah, and, it's confusing, it's annoying, and it's just not worth it.
The IMDb rating, which is currently a, 4.3, but it's only 25 people who've rated it, so I'm pretty sure some of those high scores are from people involved with making this movie. I mean, who the fuck in their right mind is going to give that movie a 10 out of 10, or even a 9 or an 8 out of 10?
Well, apparently about 7 people.
Yeah, but the majority of people who have rated this have given it either a 1 or a 2. So, there you go.
So I'm just going to throw this one. This is a thoroughly unenjoyable time. And like, it's funny because I'm not a big fan of a lot of the movies you talk about tonight. In this last movie when you talk about, I also hated. But this movie, I really, really had a problem with. I disliked it. And I'm going to give this a 2 out of 10, if only because I thought there was some potential in the story had it actually been written with any type of decency. And the idea of something happening in the wards in the UK, hey, that's almost okay. So, I mean, a 2 out of 10, it doesn't matter which way you color it, it's still in the abysmal rating. But that's the best I can do for Wolf Ward.
So as I said before, it gets my lowest rating, which is a 1 out of 10. I think they had, like I said, the acting is not completely terrible. I even think they're capable of at least filming something worth watching. Like, it's not like they don't know how to hold a camera. But yeah, it's one of the lamest films I've seen. It's a found footage film, like I said, one of the easiest films you can make, hardest films to master. And the way this movie was written, I assume it was written, maybe it was written on a napkin somewhere, and they just made the movie based on that. But none of the dialogue drew me into any of the scenes or characters, and it's a type of movie that if you just made it with some of your friends for a bit of a laugh or something, or you could look at it and say, look at what we did, and you could be happy with that. But if you're putting this up against professionally made movies, it's just gonna look like shit. So yeah, 1 out of 10. That's a rating.
Indeed. It, yes.
Yeah, so the final movie for today's show is My Boyfriend's Back from 1993. in which a senior high school student named Johnny Dingle, nice name by the way, he's forever been in love with Missy McLeod, but when he sums up the courage to tell her about his feelings, he ends up getting killed. And then he rises from the grave as the undead and is determined to take the love of his life to the prom. So this is a movie, I actually watched this only a couple of weeks ago, and I did watch it again last night just to once again refresh the memory and restore the spank bank. Thanks, Tracy Lynn. Maybe before I talk about it, maybe you should tell everyone all the good things that are in this movie.
Well, so I think this is obviously a movie that I am not inclined to enjoy. So I guess I need to give a little background on this. Pretty much the only reason. So the way that we do this show is, we each give each other a list of movies and we choose movies, and the only reason I chose this movie was because I'm to be called a horror, and this was very loud on horror. I mean, this is like a little zombie action, but that's not enough.
There's elements, but it's for the most part a teen comedy. Really.
Yeah, so, and I'm not necessarily against teen comedies, like American Pie, best movie ever made, but this was a it's not just comedy; it's like really goofy comedy.
It's oddball, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not my type of comedy. So this had so many things going against it.
As we've seen with like The Greasy Strangler and Triloquist, all those really oddball type horror movies.
Aside from House.
Comedy, yeah.
So yeah, this movie had a lot of things going against it. I thought there were some funny lines, and like Chucky said, Tracy Lind, who was also in Fright Night Part 2, and a couple of other movies like Class of 1999 and such. She is a nice piece of eye candy. I mean, I would come back from the dead for her, but it's this type of comedy is just not my thing. So I mean, I guess it's going into this movie, I knew that, so I'm trying not to be too uncontrolled. I'm not the demographic for this movie, so the fact that I hated it should be like a big shock. But like as soon as you saw the post, I'm like, oh god. So yeah, not my cup of tea, but that's just me. I'm jiggy. I have no fun in life, so.
Well, speaking of the horror side of things, there is some Friday the 13th connections here. So obviously it's a movie that's produced by Sean Cunningham, and I noticed Harry Manfredini did the music on this one, so...
Yeah, it's amazing. I saw those names and I'm like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, and I assume maybe there's other people involved in Friday the 13th movies who actually got brought on to help with this movie, but those are the two main names that I noticed. So, there's that aspect to it. I guess maybe, they wanted to branch out and thought, hey, there's money in these types of movies, I guess. I think this movie is also a bit of a product of its time. Like, I don't feel like it's a movie where it's going to get a lot of new fans. Like, you know how, like, 80s slashers, like, it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 40 years old or 20 years old. If you watch some 80s slashers, you enjoy them, you're going to go out and look for more 80s slashers, aren't you? But, these types of movies, they're so few and far between. I don't think there's that same love for this genre, I guess, as you would for something like 80 slasher. So, I feel like if it's a movie you watched back in the 90s, back when it came out, you get maybe like a nostalgic vibe from it that helps you to continue to enjoy it. Maybe there's a relatability aspect to this as well. I mean, for me, it did remind me of a few things from high school. Like, for instance, my prom sucked, but I might as well been a zombie at my prom. But it kind of reminded me of my quest to ask someone to go with me, because when I was in high school, there was like a girl I don't know for you, but I assume for a lot of people, there might be that person that you come across in high school that you start thinking about quite a lot, and someone you really getting into, and for so many days or maybe weeks, I was thinking, I really want to ask her to go, and I kept putting it off, and the day that I finally gained the courage to say, okay, I'm going to go find her, I'm going to go ask her. And so I go around, start, asking some people where I can find her, because I hadn't seen her that day. And that day, not like the day before she was at school, but that day, for some reason, she had quit school. So
that's a kick in the face.
Yeah, such a kick in the pants. That day that I get the courage to go find her and ask her, that very day she's gone. And now, the even worse thing is, she actually still ends up going somehow. I don't know, but she went with someone else who I don't even think the guy went to our school. I didn't recognize him. So, another kick in the pants is that one of my friends talked to her later, the next year or something. He ran into her while she was working at some store, and he mentioned to her, that I was gonna ask her and stuff, and she said, "Oh, yeah, she would have went with me." So that, it's just
it makes you wish you were a zombie.
But another aspect to it is I actually had to have some surgery, literally less than a week before the prom, so I could barely move, to be honest, when I went. And they messed up the seating and everything. I was meant to be sitting with my friends, and they had me sitting with all these other people I didn't like. It was just a disaster of a night, and the events leading up to it, so...
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I was so out of it at that point in time, I did not even consider going to my prom, so... It's like a complete non-entity. I went to the post-prom. We had a post-prom party, and I was there for 15 minutes. I'm like, no, I'm done. So yeah, that's my experience with prom. So now that we've thoroughly depressed people.
Yeah. So, but anyways, my point was, I could find things in this movie that I could relate to, and I think that helped. And also in my older age, I'm starting to see, you know how when you're younger, you're very set in what you like. For instance, music. When I was a teenager, if you asked me to listen to some Phil Collins, I would have said, no, you gay wad. I'm not listening to that shit. Now I'll definitely listen to it. I would, be very much stuck on, I only listen to heavy metal. That's what I'm into, and now it's everything. And it's the same with movies. I can actually sit down and watch a drama with a love story in it, whereas 20 years ago I probably couldn't. And that's another aspect to this, because there is that love story aspect to this, which some horror fans, they're just going to see it as, it's just not something that really interests them. But hey, to each their own, I guess.
I guess one thing I was saying is Movies Defense was I did like it had sort of a comic book type setup, showing comic book panels. Hey, this is the story of what happened. I think it helped with its sort of slapstick, lighthearted feel. So I appreciated they went with that type of artistic vibe.
Yeah, I liked some of those random insults that guy was throwing out to Tracy Lynn, calling her zombie slut and horror of the undead.
Oh, and actually, now that you mention it, this is one of the things that I'm bringing up only because it's something that, hey, it should probably be brought up. But this is a somewhat early movie of Philip Seymour Hoffman, which it's not really been an actor I was I've not seen that many things with him in it, but he has a pretty recognizable face, and he pops up a bit in this movie. And so hey, if you're a Philip Seymour Hoffman guy, you ought to see our movies, you should check this one out.
There is a scene, I think it was like a dream, I guess, that Johnny was having of Tracy Lind, where she's like, "Don't you want to eat me?" And he's like, "Well," like, I think we know what he's thinking of when she says that, or at least what I was thinking of when she said that. So just a bit of a shame that she had her hair in pigtails, which is not necessarily a look I go for, but there you go. One other thing, I did notice Matthew McConaughey was in this one, at least just as an extra. Oh, not as an extra, he just had like one line in the movie when they're in the theaters. I didn't recognize him the first time I watched it, or maybe I thought it could have been him, but I just didn't go look. But when I watched it last night, I was like, damn, that really does sound like him, so I'm gonna go check it out, and it was him. And, you know, he eventually, I think the next movie he did after this was Texas Chainsaw Massacre Next Generation movie, so... Anyways, you know, that's a big name that managed to have a very small appearance in this one. Actually, something else, I don't know if it's something that they just used to do back in like the 80s, 90s, and movies would have like a main song in the movie. Like this one's got the song "Hanging On for Dear Life." It's kind of like played mostly in its entirety towards the end at the prom, but throughout the movie you can kind of hear little instrumental versions of that song going on throughout. Like they don't go on for very long, it's just like 10 seconds here, 20 seconds there. But I noticed that's something a lot of like some of the older movies used to do, and I can't recall newer movies still doing that. And I don't know, there's something to it that I enjoy.
Yeah, and I also what you mentioned, since you brought up that prom scene, I also did think, despite the whole movie being cheesy and, you know, like slapstick comedy, like body parts falling off, like, God. And actually, the biggest thing that annoyed me is, you know, he came back from the dad and people were like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" Like, it happens every now and again, I guess. So that type of casual, "Oh, hey, he's dad," so that's fine, we're cool with it. Yeah, I could have done without that. But I did think the Andy and prom scene, when, like, he's pretty much, or I guess finally actually dying while they're dancing, I thought that had somewhat of an emotional impact. And then they ruin it by that stupid having, or I guess it's a purgatory or limbo type thing. It's sort of, I don't know, it was ambitious of them, so I guess well done. But yeah, I just could have done without that conclusion. But at the same time, it's like, I can't imagine a way they would have ended this I would have been okay with.
Yeah. Okay, so my boyfriend's back. You know, I had a decent time with this, like I said, just because there's a few different aspects of it. Like, I can relate to some of the things going on in the movie back from when I was in high school. But also a big thing, I think, is Tracy Lind herself. I mean, oh jeez, she might be my favorite actress. It's a shame she hasn't been in movies for so long. Doesn't seem like she wants to do acting, so. But this movie, it's like the first time I watched it was just so, like, I didn't expect it to be such an oddball type movie. Like I said, when he comes back from the dead, they're just like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" or whatever. And I was expecting them to be like, "Wait, what the fuck is going on?" Like, and, you know, he tries to take a bite out of someone, and they're like, "Oh, that was unfortunate." Yeah, it's just, and then eventually, I think the second time around, because I was I knew what to expect, what type of movie it was, it became a little easier to accept scenes like that. So in any case, I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10, and please marry me, Tracy.
Yeah, so I'll just simply say that this really isn't my type of movie. It's like if I watched Teen Wolf or something. You know, I actually might like that one because some of the actors involved, but it's just like a horror light that is like way more comedic than it is horror, and just not my type of thing. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. You know, it's amazing because a lot of times this would be like the worst movie of the show for me, but then we had Wolfworld, so I mean that went out the window. So, but I mean 4 out of 10. It's you know, if you like this type of thing, it's fine. It's your type of thing. It's just not for me. So, seems like a fair rating.
So Tracy's not worth 6 stars?
Well, she is like worth 3 of the 4 I gave it. So, I mean, that's not bad. Like one actress bumping it up by 3 points. Not many actresses could do that.
Yeah.
So speaking of actresses, what's your favorite subgenre of horror?
Well, funny you ask that. I mean, normally I would just give you the straight answer, slasher. And I think that's still, for the most part, true. But yeah, like I was saying in our conversation for the movie that we just discussed, which was My Boyfriend's Back, for anyone who actually wants to go listen to what I was saying about this aspect of subgenres. But yeah, once again, it's kind of like, if you asked me this question 15, 20 years ago, I would have a very definitive answer. And now it's not so clear. Because, you know, when I was younger, you could say, what type of music do you listen to? It'd just be strictly heavy metal, and pretty much that'd be it. Now, you know, I'm listening to shit that I would never have listened to 15, 20 years ago. And I think it's the same with subgenres. I still think slasher's probably my favorite. Like, when I think about, okay, why slashers over everything else? And I think the main thing it comes down to, or at least one of the main things, is that, like, when you think about who are the most iconic horror characters, you think, okay, you got like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Chucky, all that. What movies, what subgenre do they belong to? Slasher. So, you know, yeah, I guess it's just the easiest characters, or easiest subgenre to get the best characters from.
Yeah, so obviously for me, slasher has always been one of my go-to genres, and I like some of my other favorite genres. Genres are pretty closely related, like Giallos from Italy, from I guess generally a precursor to slashers. And they generally have more of a mystery element too, which I really enjoy, like trying to guess, hey, who committed the crimes. And then, I mean, this is one of those oddball, jiggy answers, but the movies of the style of the 20s and 30s, like the old dark house mystery type things, which are arguably a precursor to elements of slashes, like crimes being committed in this house with a bunch of multiple passages, and it's just like 80 different suspects and people doing different things. I really like those movies. I've reviewed a lot of them, and I always have a fun time. Like even some of like the ones that aren't even enjoyed by people who like the type of stuff. Like there's a movie called The Monster Walks from like 1932, and it has like a 3.1 or 3.2 on IMDb. I give it like an 8.5. Legitimately love it. Have a fun time with it. So those are always like, you know, mystery type horror movies like Giallos and slashes. I enjoy all that stuff. And somewhat related, I do enjoy some ghost movies, you know, supernatural movies that have more of a mystery to it. And one that comes to mind at the bat would be The Changeling, which I know I liked a bit more than Chucky did, because I enjoyed the mystery behind it. And another one, which I actually thought was, despite it being like, you know, when I went into this movie, I wasn't expecting much. But the Haunting on Connecticut, I actually liked that one. Pretty solid movie. So I used to not be a big supernatural fan, like, and to some extent I'm not. Like I hate like actresses in movies, for instance, or possessed in movies. I just don't do anything for me. But I think there's plenty of ghost movies. Like about, I would say 45% of them generally pretty okay. So that's me becoming a I guess more conscious of the genre and enjoying more things.
Well, well, at least I think both you and I are fairly aligned on subgenres that we, or at least we, you know, we're both slasher guys who pretty picky when it comes to things like zombies, vampires, werewolves. And when even though I need to get a little more up to date with all the different movies that we've talked about and rate them on the website, but out of the ones that I have rated, the bottom three each belong to those three subgenres. There's a zombie movie, a werewolf movie, and a vampire movie. So, that's probably indicative of what I think about those subgenres. Like, they have to be really good movies for me to enjoy.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like zombie movies, I think how to do right, at least in my viewpoint, because I just feel so many of them are repetitive, which I know is somewhat ironic coming from a slasher guy. But at least in slasher movies, you can get creative kills and stuff. In zombie movies, it's almost always like this group of people meet up with a more aggressive group of people. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be fun because it can be fun, and this zombie movies are fantastic. Like Train to Busan, which came out in 2016. That's a fantastic zombie movie. But so many of them are just so repetitive, and when it comes to movies like vampire movies or werewolf movies, I feel like those are so much steeped in like the classic horror genre. Like when you think about werewolves or vampires, a lot of people are going to jump to either the Wolfman or Dracula with Bela Lugosi. I know a few people might think about like maybe later adaptations of Dracula, like maybe the '79 movie or like the '92 movie with Gary Oldman, but it's very traditional horror genres, and it's very hard to I think break out of that. I mean, like we've talked about it before, like how many great werewolf movies are there? Like maybe five, um, and that's maybe as many as 10. And then vampire movies, there's are going to be a bit more, but I feel like those are genres that are somewhat old fashioned, and they only really stand out nowadays if they do them in a type of different way. Like 30 Days of Night, that was a bit more interesting, even though I don't think it's a great movie. It's a bit more interesting, and I can appreciate that.
I also think streaming is somewhat diminished my love for the slasher genre. Maybe just genres in general. Because as I was saying in our Wolfwood discussion, anyone can now really make a movie and put it up there for everyone to see. You don't have to necessarily go out and find distribution and things like that to get it into video stores, and so you can go out there and make a shitty movie, put it up, and and the slasher genre, that's enough. Even though I think it's requires a little bit more than what you would with making a found footage movie. It's another movie that another type of subgenre that I think in most people's eyes, you can typically get away with making without having or needing a big budget. And yeah, it's just there's so many bad movies coming out, cheap movies where they're written poorly, the characters suck, and all that kind of stuff. And same with found footage. It's, and I think streaming. I have a love-hate relationship with streaming at the moment. Plus, I always find that with streaming, I can rarely ever settle on what I want to watch just because there's just so much stuff in front of me. It's just, at a video store, I can just look at a row of movies like this one, this one, this one. Take it, go. So, anyways, that's a conversation for a different day. Maybe streaming versus physical media or whatever, but yeah, I think it's impacted my love of the genre because now I'm just seeing so many poor movies coming out.
I agree with you because a lot of post two. I can be somewhat critical of like post 2000 slashers. At the same time, I like 90%. Like I bring it up every now and again. I really like Iced from 1988. Actually, I think IMDb has an 89 now for some reason, but I legitimately enjoy that movie, and like most of the slashers from like the 70s and 80s, I legitimately enjoy. And then as soon as it's like came post 2000, I immediately hated. If it's the same type of low quality type thing. So I can be somewhat critical, but I guess for me the reason that slashers have a little more, I guess, appeal is the same thing I mentioned before with some quality mystery going on. I like not knowing necessarily who the killer is, even if it's sometimes a bit obvious. And even though some of the newer movies or cheaper movies might diminish your appreciation, I guess might be fair to say, it's not like they're necessarily bad. There's a movie, I think it came out 2010, but I might be wrong. It's a pretty bad name. It's called The Horrible Fall. It was, I think, a student project. I'm not entirely sure. Like it's a very cheap movie. Somewhat cliche in how they deal with the slasher material. But despite it being like shot on camera and having a budget of like $25, I actually thought, the kids involved, because I think they're mostly teenagers and young adults, I thought they did, pretty okay. So I don't know. It's one of the things where it has like pros and cons. I'm not necessarily a giant fan of streaming, but at the same time, if it can give a big pool of movies to actually see, like, hey, I've never heard of this one before, hey, I guess if it works, it works.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess yeah, we can talk more about streaming in a different segment, I guess.
Indeed. And I also want to mention two genres. I guess one's not necessarily a genre, but anthology horror movies, which I think were more popular back in the 70s, 80s, and today. But there's still a lot coming out nowadays. Like you have like the was it ABCs of Death and movies like that. And also God, VHS. That was some big movie what like 10 years ago. So I think I enjoy anthologies a bit more than Chucky. Um, and I can understand the reasoning behind that. But when anthologies probably their heyday was in the early 70s. There's some fantastic movies then. Um, and I guess the one good thing about anthologies is it's not difficult for there to at least be one pretty good story in the movie. So even if like most of the stories suck, if they have one that knocks it out of the park, I mean, hey, at least it's worth watching. So A+.
Yeah.
I do wish there were more good like space themed horror movies though.
Yeah. That's another subgenre that I've never really been able to get into. Movies in outer space. Outside of Jason X, which I think we can both agree is probably the best space themed horror movie ever made.
It's really funny because I was assuming you were going to say outside of Alien. You're like outside of Jason X. I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, Alien, Jason X, pretty much the same thing.
Well, hey, it's a slasher movie, so slashers above alien movies.
And yeah, as far as I really the only two notable movies aside from Alien when it comes to space-based horror is probably Galaxy of Terror from 1981, mainly because hey has said hey Robert Englund, and then Event Horizon from '97, which I'm not even like a big fan of, but it has some cool ideas and it's like one of the most popular movies ever made, so it must mean something.
Hmm.
Now the question then becomes, what's your least if you had to guess have like one or two least favorite genres?
I would. It's such a tough one to really figure out, but maybe it is films in space, and I think it's mainly because outside of the Alien movies, maybe there are some, and well, outside of Alien and Jason X, to be honest, I can't even think off the top of my head of any movies in space that I actually enjoy.
I mean, there are plenty of okay ones.
I mean, there might be some out there, and I'm just not thinking of them. But to be honest, yeah, off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank.
No, you just reminded me. This is a somewhat amusing story, somewhat not amusing story. Back in the day when I was doing my October challenges, where I tried to watch as many horror movies in one time in the month of October, I had a space themed day. I watched like 10 space themed horror movies between the years of 1965 and like 1990 something. I think probably 91. So I watched like about 9 times movies all in the same day. The next day I can't remember the differences between any of them. So.
Yeah.
It's I know there's some good ones out there, but it's one of the harder ones to find. I think for me, and I mentioned this a little earlier. It's probably the whole possession exorcism type movies. I'm not even a particularly big fan of The Exorcist. And for me, it's partially a religious thing. Like, I was raised Catholic, but I mean, I haven't actually believed in anything like remotely like that for God knows how well, ironically, God knows how long. So it's really hard for me to get into the whole, oh, this evil demon is changing my daughter or like my son. Or I just don't care. And especially when they couple that with something like found footage, possession and found footage, then it's really hard for me to pretend I care.
Yeah.
This also, I guess it should be mentioned, I'm also not a particularly big fan of body horror, which is why I somewhat have lukewarm feelings for most of like David Cronenberg stuff. Even like The Fly, which is the 1986 The Fly, like it's fine, but that type of horror when there's somebody just like slowly changing or mutating, like I don't care how it's done. Like even I think it's Contracted, which came out like 2013. It's like a sexually transmitted disease type movie. This woman's like falling apart. That type of horror, I don't know if it just grosses me out too much. It's hard for me to get into. I don't enjoy watching them. I feel more uncomfortable than anything, and so yeah, body horror is one of my like things I almost never intentionally go out of my way to watch.
Well, I think with slashers, there's an element of well, I don't want to say, it's something that's likely to happen in real life or anything, but I think, when you think about it, it's just some guy in a mask chasing you with a knife. You could see that. That could happen at any point in any time, wherever you live. You could technically be attacked by someone in that way, but how often in real life am I going to come across someone turning into a fly, or zombies chasing me? Maybe with Corona at some point that might happen, but I haven't seen it happen yet. So I think there's also that element of, I don't want to say realism, but it's just more grounded in reality, I guess. And because of that, I can find, not that I have a tremendous amount of fear when I watch horror movies these days, but I at least I can put myself in that situation and see why someone would be scared, because it could happen, I guess. I don't know. I have a poor way of explaining this, but basically, I think people understand sort of what I'm trying to say. Of course, if I was in a situation and zombies attacking me, of course I'd be shitting my pants, but I just don't see it ever happening. I guess that's my point.
And actually, you reminded me of something. So like obviously I'm a big slasher fan. I'm not a. This is sort of like a spin-off of the slasher genre, which is like the whole home invasion type thing. Probably the most popular one being The Strangers, but they also have like The Purge and other. I mean, like you said, this much like you mentioned for slashers or like zombies or found footage. Like you can find a home invasion movie pretty much anywhere on streaming sites, and I think a lot of them tend to be, well, for one, a lot of them seem to be like, oh, this is based off a true story type BS that I just hate anyway. But then like home invasion can sometimes be creepy. It can sometimes be really effective, but I think a lot of the time it's just, for most genres, a lot of the time, like 60% of them just aren't really that worth it.
Yeah.
And what is your most lukewarm genre?
I don't even know
Actually,
how to answer that.
Do you have any genres that like 50-50 for you? Or is that like pretty much any genre? I guess technically any genre can be like that. Even if you're more inclined to enjoy slashes, it's so like, I mean, if you're being honest, it's probably so like more bad slashes than there are good ones.
Yeah, I don't think I have any way of really, prioritizing one subgenre over the other. Like, it's just pretty much, I know that, a good slasher movie could potentially get up to a 10 out of 10 for me. Like, Child's Play, that's a 10 out of 10. It's a slasher movie. Whereas a good vampire movie, I doubt it's ever gonna get to a 10. A good zombie movie, I doubt I'll ever see one that I feel is a 10 out of 10. So I think there's certain subgenres that no matter how good the movie is, it probably will never rival my most loved movies. But I don't see any like subgenre either where it's just like there's no chance at all I'll like it. So, I've really got slasher at the top, and then everything else is kind of like a step below. But putting those in any kind of order is just something I can't do.
Yeah, and I guess I have just have one more thing that so I guess this isn't necessarily a genre, cause subgenre, because it's like a very umbrella term. But horror comedies, sometimes a horror comedy, like I enjoy a pretty decent amount of horror comedies. I liked Taco and Dare versus Evil. I enjoy Shaun of the Dead. Um, like that Japanese movie House, I enjoyed. Um, and some of those are actually somewhat goofy themselves, but then obviously stuff like, well, like you said, The Greasiest Strangler or Trailer
Oh yeah.
Quest. Some of the more I guess outlandishly goofy comedies. Like even God, what was it called? Um, it was a 1980s Terrorvision. There's a movie called Terrorvision from 1986, I believe. And I'd been interested in seeing it on for such a long time, and then I finally saw it. It's like this really silly, goofy alien comedy. I'm like, oh God, what am I watching? And some of those, I guess, for me, are just really difficult to get into, mainly because I'm cringing half the time and just feels ridiculous. But that said, that's when it's like if they do a really good um horror comedy, I'm down for it. I can enjoy it, and that's all that matters.
For reals.
It just goes to show that horror is the only genre that matters.
Mm, it's the best genre, but maybe not the only one that matters.